What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao. Thanks for joining us for the news. 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered prohibited waters around Taiwan's Kinmen Islands on Monday. The Taiwanese Coast Guard sent out 3 patrol boats to intercept the Chinese vessels. It's the second time that Chinese vessels were patrolling near Kinmen in recent days. Taiwan says it will continue to monitor and expel ships that enter its prohibited waters. China has maintained a constant presence around Kinmen since 2 Chinese nationals were killed in a clash with Taiwan's Coast Guard earlier this year. With less than 2 weeks to go before Taiwan's new president is inaugurated, preparations for the big day are ramping up. The Army has been rehearsing a major flyover for the ceremony. Jaime Ocon went to check it out.
Preparations are underway for the inauguration of President-elect Lai Ching-te later this month. And that includes demonstrations by the military as he gets ready for the big day. That includes dozens of helicopters at this Army base in Taoyuan City as the Army prepares for a tradition that sees Taiwan's largest national flag flown over the capital on May 20th on Inauguration Day.
最大的挑战点是国旗小队与协议小队都必须在同一个时间点做一个集合的动作。在空中集合的过程中，因为是不同的着向，在集合的时候，可能就对于飞行机组人员会有挑战性比较高的状况发生。
In recent weeks, the military has been on alert as China, which threatens Taiwan, ramps up military activity in the region. In the lead up to the ceremony, the military will practice these flyovers multiple times, each in the very early morning around 5 a.m. Defense officials say that practices for the inauguration flyover will begin early next week and are urging the public not to panic if they hear fighter aircraft or helicopters flying over the country. Instead, they should feel confident that the military can not only protect the country's sovereignty, but also celebrate it. Joseph Wu and Jaime Ocon in Taoyuan City for TaiwanPlus.
The Foreign Ministry is taking opposition Kuomintang lawmaker Xu Chaoxing to court for allegedly leaking secret documents. Xu has raised questions about Taiwan's partnership with a Czech organization to send aid to Ukraine. She hasn't provided evidence, but says she has questions about the contractor's close ties to Czech politicians. The Foreign Ministry says Xu leaked secret documents when talking to the media, and they filed a legal complaint against her. Xu welcomes the suit, saying it proves her suspicions are founded. Australia's Prime Minister has described a military incident between one of its helicopters and a Chinese fighter jet as unacceptable. The Chinese Air Force J-10 jet dropped flares near an Australian helicopter in international airspace over the Yellow Sea. The helicopter was in the area helping enforce UN sanctions on North Korea. Anthony Albanese says Australia has lodged complaints with China.
We have made very strong representations at every level to China about this incident, which we regard as unprofessional and unacceptable.
Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire that could end months of war in Gaza. But Israel says the terms need more negotiation, and it has launched attacks in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are taking refuge. Tiffany Wong reports.
Displaced again. Palestinians are packing up from their temporary refuge in Rafah, one of the last humanitarian aid crossings into the Gaza Strip, as they prepare for Israeli strikes. Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, just agreed to a ceasefire negotiated by Qatari and Egyptian mediators. But Israel has refused the conditions and is carrying on with its assault on the Strip's southern end, where over 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. It's unclear what exactly the deal entails.
ولما اتفقنا انه حماس ردت وقالت وقف اطلاق نار واحنا اتفقنا كثير وقلنا يعني حتى اذا بس اسرائيل ما طحت وتمادت كثير انه ما بدها توقف علينا النار وبدهم يدخلوا رفح ونزلوا عننا مشيت.
حاليا احنا ما صدقنا انه حماس وافقت على الهدنه، بس لكن مع الاسف اسرائيل لسه ما زالت تتمادى وتاخر في الرد تبعها. هذه مشكلة كبيرة بالنسبة لنا، لأنه إذا ضلت ومعندها على كلامها في دخولها على رفح، إحنا مش حنلاقي مكان نروح عليه.
Israel dropped evacuation notices over Rafah, warning 100,000 Palestinians to move to a designated humanitarian safe zone where 450,000 people are already sheltering. Israel has been after the destruction of Hamas since the Palestinian militant group killed over 1,000 people in Israel and took over 200 hostages in a surprise attack on October 7th last year. Israeli retaliation has killed over 34,000 people in Gaza since then. Fighting only halted once in November, when Hamas released a number of Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But Hamas is believed to still hold an estimated 100 Israeli hostages. In Tel Aviv, pressure on the Israeli government to accept a ceasefire is growing, while the United Nations called Israeli attacks on Rafah inhumane. The UN reiterated its call for a ceasefire, also warning that the Israeli-designated safe zone is not safe for Palestinians. And the United States, Israel's biggest aid sponsor, has also raised humanitarian concerns about Rafah.
We've made clear our views about operations in Rafah that could potentially put more than 1 million innocent people at greater risk. During his call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the president again made this clear.
But with hopes of a ceasefire fleeting and continuously displaced over the past few months, Palestinians in Gaza fear they're losing options to find their way out of this conflict. John Su and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
The death toll from devastating floods in Brazil has risen to 85, with more than 130 other people still missing. The flooding has affected almost 2/3 of the nearly 500 cities in the southernmost state of Rio Grande do Sul, according to the state civil defense authority. Around 150,000 people have been displaced. The partial collapse of a hydroelectric dam has worsened conditions. President Lula da Silva has visited the disaster zone and asked Congress to declare a public calamity in the state. This status would authorize extra government spending. Less than a month after a volcanic eruption rocked northern Indonesia, rescuers are still working to save the pets left behind. Bryn Thomas reports.
In the last month, Mount Rong in northern Indonesia has erupted over a dozen times. The volcano stirred up lightning storms and spewed ash and lava onto the surrounding islands. 11,000 nearby residents were forced to evacuate, leaving their homes, possessions, and pets behind. Now volunteers from neighboring islands are risking their lives to rescue the animals that survived.
Ada kucing satu, anjing dua, burung satu. Itu ada burung.
Many of the animals they rescued have physical and mental scars from their ordeal. They've spent weeks in burned out and abandoned homes, scavenging for food in a landscape choked with ash and debris.
Nak minum, nak makan.
Stres ya?
Stres, trauma.
Kasihan.
Ketakutan. Makanya agak susah direscue. Baku rusuh.
Oh, bagus.
Indonesian officials have warned that the ongoing eruptions are causing landslides and lava flows on the island. But as rocks continue to fall, the rescue workers continue their mission, moving injured animals to nearby shelters for treatment.
Dan masyarakat juga sadar kalau seperti anjing kucing itu kan ya sahabat ya, maksudnya anjing kucing itu hewan yang setia. Jadi kalau bisa jangan dimakan.
And while the animals have been treated for physical injuries, it's clear it will take far longer for them to recover emotionally from the trauma.
Ada kena batu, ada. Kena batu?
Iya, sudah malas makan.
Batu waktu erupsi yang lalu?
Iya, lari ke dalam rumah dia.
Oh, kasihan.
Both the animals and the people affected by Mount Rong's eruption will bear the scars of disaster long into the future. Weeks after the initial blast, at least 800 residents from the island have been told they'll have to resettle permanently. But thanks to the efforts of these rescuers, at least some of them will be able to do so with their pets. John Su and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's extreme weather changes are affecting the country's bees and the honey they produce. Harrell Hughes reports.
On a rooftop in northern Taiwan, Sherry Lo tends to her bees, a hobby she picked up when she retired.
其实有时候你看到这个蜜蜂在这样飞，非常有疗愈的作用。真的啊，真的啊，你看到它这样飞，真的很可爱啊。然后它是低频的那个声音嘛，对，然后你就站在旁边这样看，有时候我就站在旁边这样看它，你知道，哎，觉得是种享受。
Beekeeping is more than just a recreational exercise. 3/4 of all crops in the world depend on bees to pollinate them. But pesticides, mites, and extreme temperature changes are causing problems for bee populations. And in southern Taiwan, it has impacted this year's honey harvest.
以前就是去山上的时候，200多箱蜜蜂，我们就可以采1到5天就可以采900公斤的蜂蜜，但现在就是比较少，就是差不多10天左右才有办法采300公斤那边。
In February, southern Taiwan saw soaring temperatures and little rainfall. The result? Fewer flowers blooming in the spring, meaning less nectar for the bees to make into honey. Beekeepers have had to feed them sugar, adding to their operating costs, and they hope the government can help.
那这个部分呢，我们已经有通报到农业部去。那农业部现在召开专家会议以后，才会责成是否会开放天然灾害的救助。
For Sherry in northern Taiwan, this year's rainy and cold winter also affected her hives and the honey she gets from them. And although beekeeping for her is a hobby, not a livelihood, it saddens her all the same.
也不是说为了赚钱了，其实话说回来了，我觉得，养它其实也还不错，可是呢，要去照顾它，还蛮麻烦的，所以其实你还是要有这个爱心。
Either as a hobby or a business, honey production cannot exist without bees. And as extreme weather increases, it's created a sticky situation for both bees and their keepers. Devin Tsai and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC will keep its place at the top of the industry for years to come. That's what semiconductor experts are predicting. As John Van Trieste explains, the chip giant's focus on speed, power, and efficiency is driving its success.
In the race to build the world's most advanced computer chips, Taiwan's TSMC looks set to hold on to its lead. That's because in plants like this, big ideas are taking shape. The latest is this, so-called 1.6 nanometer technology. Chips made with it will start coming out in 2026. They'll have 3 important advantages: speeds up to 10% faster, power use up to 20% lower, and more tightly packed transistors, in some cases up to double the density of current chips. In short, the new chips are going to be more powerful, more efficient, and more compact. And that's just what a key up-and-coming industry, AI, needs. Phone makers will also be interested.
因为我们对手机的运算力要求持续增加，而且手机晶片的数量够大，可以分摊那个光照的成本。
Some industry insiders expect this demand will allow TSMC to keep its edge over rivals Samsung and Intel.
在2026年的时候，在制程技术上面来讲，不会让 Intel 专美于前，因为 Intel 在2026年也会导出他们的4世代，也就是14A 1.4奈米制程，因为在1.4奈米跟1.6奈米几乎是处在一个相同的一个世代当中。
And that's good news for Taiwan's economy, an economy where tech, and above all semiconductors, are key. Luffy Li and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's iconic Alishan forest train has hit the tracks for the first time in the UK, making its first journey in Wales. The Alishan Forest Railway has loaned the train to Wales for 3 years. The rail company says the collaboration is a good opportunity for train enthusiasts in the UK to experience the iconic red locomotive for themselves.
落实推动双方实质的互惠交流，更能同时增加彼此在国际的能见度，期待能有更多的国际友人看到阿里山临铁的珍贵价值。
Thanks for joining us here on What's Up Taiwan. Visit our website or follow us on social media to see more of our reports. Finally, head over to Lima, Peru for their Comic-Con. We've got fans dressed up as video game characters, space marines, superheroes, and more. These are my people. I'm Eric Al. We'll see you later.
You're watching TaiwanPlus News, the voice of freedom in Asia.